one reason why the Broadband Commission as a concept is working is that it's both global and PPP at the same time. But the issue, of course, is what really brings me here. I think that we are living in the information era. We're living in a 21st century that is increasingly getting wired. I mean, I believe there's no question that in 100 years, for example, everybody is going to be using broadband. But much of the world can't wait that long. And it would have to unless we gingered things up. One of the things that commissions do in the international system is produce reports. And there have been two. The first one sort of laying out the basic case, which I think is now no longer seriously contested. The second one going into much more detail about building on a platform for action for the future. That's where we're at right now as we speak, which is about a year into the Commission's existence. I was at the original first meeting in Geneva when we were trying to really feel our way as to what the logic of the Commission is. I think we're getting much more action-oriented now, and the Commission has set up 8 working groups, which is a way of disaggregating the issue and seeing how broadband can be applied in specific areas like education or the promotion of multilingualism, or indeed in developing public-private partnerships. There is a plan of action being talked about, and there is a serious talk of a summit in October around the time of the annual telecom summit of the ITU. And it's not at all a bad idea to bring in buy-in at the highest political level for the broadband cause. So that may well be where we come out at the end of the day today in terms of thinking about the steps forward. My own view, which I've been battling for a little bit in the meeting and hope to return to the charge on, is that we need to do much more on the advocacy side. That is that I think the problem with any group of people who are already convinced about a particular issue is that they spend their meetings preaching to the converted themselves. And what we need to do is get the message out and make it important to the rest of the world, to the general informed public, to companies in this sector, and to government decision makers around the world, some of whom are represented here. We have half a dozen ministers in our group, but many of whom are perhaps blissfully unaware of the potential of broadband in this particular context and the kind of state-of-the-art global thinking that the Broadband Commission is coming up with. If you troll the internet, you'll tend to find more easily the things that support our point of view, not least our own exegeses on these issues. But if you look at the criticisms, one criticism is the classic one: why are these people spending time on broadband when the developing countries have such basic needs as drinking water, education, malaria eradication, TB, all of that? That's where their emphasis should be. That's one objection. A second objection is the argument that, well, in any case, why broadband? Let's say we accept the internet is important, but developing countries can be content with dial-up or something fairly basic. Why all this expensive rollout of broadband? That's asking for too much. And then a third intellectual criticism of us is the argument that the correlations that our reports have drawn between increased access to broadband and improvements in GDP are intellectually suspect. They suggest that, in fact, it's the other way around. It's because countries' GDP has been going up that they can afford more broadband, and that's why the correlation exists and not the other way around. Now, these are the 3 broad criticisms. I've mentioned them at the meeting today so that people should be aware that this isn't just an acquis, that we're all completely convinced and the world is convinced. I think on each of these there are good answers. On the first one, that very clearly the developing countries need everything. They need, of course, drinking water and better health and better education and all of that. But all of this adds up also to the development of human capital. And broadband is a way of ensuring that human capital develops effectively. On the question of why broadband and why not something less, I think again the answer is very clear. Why not aim for the best when you can? I mean, the classic example in the telecommunications field is how many developing countries that were struggling to string together enough landline connections have just leaped ahead, one generation over, by going straight to mobile telephones. So people who in my country wouldn't even have got onto or bothered to apply for the waiting list for a landline connection now are holding a mobile phone in their hands and communicating. So we need to go to the best available and not just settle for second or third best. And finally, on the intellectual arguments, I'll leave that to the experts to sort out. But it seems to me self-evident that just as the internet has facilitated more information, so too clearly broadband will facilitate the transmission of more and higher quality and more variable kinds of data, including visual, video, and so on, and that will undoubtedly have a positive impact on people's ability to use that data. So I think you can make a case against all of these, but we shouldn't presume that the deal is done. Well, I've seen or read of applications mainly in the developed world, which I'd like to see versions of in the developing. One clear application is in the education field, which is really sophisticated instruction, even medical instruction, being relayed across the world. Right now, for example, we have very, very good quality medical colleges in my country, but they're in the big cities or in comparable places, and the elite institutions may have excellent lectures taking place that could benefit students in other parts of the country who can't hear those lectures. Imagine if by broadband you could get not just the lecturer, but also any visual assistance. For example, if he's showing a dissection, you will need high quality video, and at the same time the ability to respond and ask questions, interactivity, which requires a transmission of large amounts of data. Imagine what broadband could do in that. In fact, in some developed countries, you're actually using broadband now for operations. You're actually being able to draw in a consultant, a specialist, half a country away by connecting him with broadband. I mean, that sort of thing. But there's a lot more that can be done, and I'm only beginning to scratch the surface with these examples.